Hello, this is Jim McKeith, and today I'm going to talk with you about some of what's new in Delphi, but really it's a few of my favorite things. Talking about just what's new in Delphi, I've found over the years that there are things that are completely new, like in the past few months, and things that are relatively new, and things that have been around for a few years, and people are still always surprised to hear about things in all three of those categories. So some of the stuff is very new, some of the stuff is just relatively new, but all of them are some of my favorite things. Real quick about me, I'm the Chief Developer Advocate and Engineer for Embarcadero Technologies. I'm a longtime software developer, like 25 years. I started with BASIC, but soon discovered Turbo Pascal and have loved it ever since. I've also spent a lot of time in C#, JavaScript, Objective-C, which, if you're an Objective-C developer, that's fine. Worked with C++, Java, done a lot of Java native Android development. So, been around the block. Delphi is my favorite programming language and one I spent the most time with. I'm also host of the podcast at delphi.org. And when I claim to fame, though, is I invented and patented swipe to unlock and pattern unlock that you find on Android devices. Back in 2000, I filed for the patent for this, where the company I was working for was Micron Computers, and they had a program where they encouraged their engineers to file for patents based on software development they were doing. Little side note, I was doing software development there with Delphi, and actually developed the software they shipped with all the computers that they shipped for years after I left until the company went out of business due to other reasons. Anyway, back to the swipe to unlock. Filed a patent and kind of forgotten about it. I had a few different patents there. And fast forward 13 years later, in 2013, I can see a headline pops up in my newsfeed that says, Apple didn't invent swipe to unlock, Jim McKeith did. And I'm like, hold on, that's my name. So I went and looked through some of my old patents I had, and sure enough, there was a patent for drawing geometric shapes to authenticate yourself to a computer system. So the patent I had was licensed, assigned to Micron Technology, which is the parent company, and they had done a cross-licensing deal with Samsung. I don't get any money or Christmas cards from this, but it's my claim to fame, and I get to include it in my slides. Also, something really exciting I've done is I built a thought-controlled drone with Google Glass, of course, powered by Delphi. The way this worked is I used this EEG headset here, the Emotive Epic, and it uses electroencephalography, which picks up minute signals from your brain based on your thoughts. So as you think, as you have thoughts and memories and such, that produces electrical current in your brain. And some of the electrical current propagates to your scalp. And then on your scalp, it's able to be picked up by this EEG using electrodes that sit on your scalp. So the software I wrote would take that signal, send it to my laptop, and then my laptop would then talk to Google Glass. And so the Google Glass provided a biofeedback so that you could see immediately what the results were, what it was picking up as your thoughts. And then you could program that to control the drone. So you would think up, the drone would go up, left, the drone would go left, etc. Very cool, very exciting demo. I've had a chance to tour the world with that and continue to do so. Oh, yes, so Google Glass runs Android, and on Android, of course, you can run your Delphi application. For fun on the weekends, I am part of an improvisational comedy group called Comedy Sports, or CSZ Boise. I've been a part of that for 5 years now. It's a worldwide organization in all over the US and Europe, so worldwide being in 2 countries, but still a very small part of the world. I've had a chance to travel to a number of different cities and play there. It's a lot of fun. It's comedy played as a sport. There's 2 teams with a referee. We have matches and games and fouls and the whole 9 yards, keeping points. It's established in 1984. It's clean comedy for everyone. Something I really enjoy and is a great thing to do when I'm not developing software. My work with the thought-controlled drone experiment actually led to me being asked to contribute to this book, The Internet of Things and Data Analytics Handbook. I did a chapter on your brain-computer interface in the Internet of Things. And so it talks about the possibilities, what opens up here with the interfacing with the brain, both input and output, there's consumer devices available for both those today, and a lot of interesting experiments around that, where you can both read and write to the brain. Also, an interesting project coming on is the Human Connectome project, which is the idea of being able to understand the entire brain and upload that into a computer, for example. They've done it with a worm, but they eventually plan to do it with humans as well. So I thought I'd talk about why I love Delphi. Delphi, in my opinion, is the best language for productivity. And it isn't just about raw productivity, being able to write code, but it's about being able to have code that's easy to read and maintain. Because the reality is, if you're writing thing of any value, if you're any decent software developer, your code's going to spend more time in maintenance than it did in development. So just being able to crank out a bunch of code isn't as valuable as being able to have code that's easy to understand and easy to maintain. And Object Pascal programming language that powers Delphi is, that's just what it's fantastic for. It's easy to read, easy to understand. It's not convoluted. There's so many other programming languages out there that I find are so convoluted and so hard to follow. And that's something I love about Delphi, is that that's not the case. The libraries and such that make up Delphi are fantastic for pure native performance across all the platforms. Just really productive, great libraries. They have, in my opinion, the right layer of abstraction so that you're not too far away from what you're trying to accomplish, but close enough. So it makes, the great thing about it is it makes the easy things, the common things, really easy, but still makes everything else possible. I've seen other tools that make, they have like a wizard or something like that makes one thing really simple. But as soon as you want to vary from that path, even just slightly, then it's incredibly complicated. But with Delphi, you can drag and drop these components and set events and properties and stuff like that. But as soon as you need to, you can develop those components as well. All the components, everything in Delphi, you can write that yourself. All the code that comes with it, you can look at how that's written, write your own code. It's all there for you. It's all just a matter of what level you want to be working at. So the best runtime library for cross-platform functionality, so you're able to be very productive, and then also your code runs very well. It's native code across all platforms we support, compiles down to native code. So you have, not only are you very productive in writing your code, but your programs run really, really well. And this is one of the things I love about Delphi, is you have this great layer of abstraction, right? The RTL, the BCL, FMX, etc. But you can also reach down and touch the metal, as I like to say. You can reach down and grab those platform APIs. The API is specific to each platform, right? You want to reach down and grab a Windows API? No problem. Android? No problem. You have the JNI bridge, lets you reach down and grab those down to the Dalvik layer and grab those APIs. It's all there. So you can work at that, drag and drop component layer. You can work at the RTL layer with all these great libraries, or you can reach down and grab those platform APIs. So many other tools out there only give you one of those three layers, but Delphi gives you the power to reach down and work at all those layers for whatever makes sense for you. This is one of the things that it just is so exciting. The amazing third-party ecosystem. There are so many other presentations out there and so many other libraries and such available for you, showing some of these amazing third-party components. I'm going to touch on just a couple of them here. By no means is it an exhaustive list. There are so many out there. Such a huge fan of TMS, all the stuff they're doing. DevExpress, Mitov Software. Wow, he's always got such amazing stuff out there. That's an incomplete list. KS Dev doing great stuff. I have some links to mention some of the stuff they're doing as well. So amazing third-party components out there. Do Google search for things. Chances are someone else has already done it. There's code up on GitHub, or there's a third-party component you can grab to make your work easier. This is something that I love about Delphi, is this huge commitment to backwards compatibility while still moving the language and the framework forward. Some things, like, for example, Unicode, there was a little bit of trouble going over it, but everybody I've talked to said, you know what, it wasn't as much trouble as they expected to do once they made that journey across the Unicode change. The reality, though, is most other platforms and frameworks out there, you're throwing your code away. I have a friend that's doing Swift development, and every time I talk to him, it's like, oh yeah, they've released a new version of Swift. I have to go rewrite everything because none of my code's compatible from version to version. There may be a bit of hyperbole in there. He may be exaggerating, but that's the trend. Everybody else, a new version comes out, you throw your code away and you start over again. Sure, that's great because you can keep rewriting your code and that's fun, but sometimes you want to ship code. You want to ship your programs. And so that requires having code that's done that you can keep improving on and maintaining. That goes back to the first point right there. Easy to read and maintain, I guess, and also easy to upgrade to new versions, to take advantage of new features, to tackle new OSs, etc. And supporting the latest platforms and technologies. Consistently, especially on the Windows platform, Delphi's been one of the first tools to support new features on Windows when it rolls out. For example, when Microsoft rolled out the desktop bridge, what was it originally called? Centennial Bridge, I think. Gosh, I can't remember. It's been too long now. But Delphi was the first tool, RAD Studio, Delphi and C++ Builder was the first tool to have the ability to build a Apex file right inside the IDE so you could send it to the Windows Store. Before Microsoft had a tool built into their IDE for that. I mean, that's the kind of commitment that Delphi has for these platforms. Continue to, just days after release, have updates for different OSs, whether it be iOS or Android or whatever, just right on the edge of making sure all this is supported. And the amazing thing here is these updates are not just raw wrappers around the APIs, but includes the full stack, all the libraries, the FireDAC, the VCL, the FireMonkey, etc., to support all these platforms. So it's really amazing that it's able to move that forward. And because it's easy to maintain and you have that backwards compatibility, that means your existing work moves forward with you onto these new platforms. One thing that I like is that you have the manual memory management, and then on mobile you have Arc. Now, the difference between Arc and garbage collection, and the reason I point this out is because Arc is deterministic. All right. Garbage collection is not deterministic. So that means at any point, it could pause and collect your garbage for you, your memory for you on garbage collection, which is like Java and .NET and other frameworks. Now, the reason that's an issue, on the server side, you usually have a ton of memory. It's not a huge deal. But on mobile devices, it's a very big deal because you have much less memory or have much tighter constraints. And so dealing with that potential of having a pause to collect memory is not a good thing. And so that's the great thing about Arc is you can, you don't have to worry about memory, but if you want to say, hey, I'm holding on to this and I'll release it later, or I know exactly when it's released, because as soon as it goes out of scope, as soon as you dereference it, etc., that's when it's released. So you have that exact memory management. You're not left wondering when it's going to be taken care of. And also, I'm going to say that our developer community is the best people around. The MVPs, the third-party partners, etc. These are some of the best people around, and it's a fantastic privilege to get to work with them in our community. So when you're programming with Delphi, you're in the company of superheroes. We have some amazing people out there doing amazing things, and they're sharing their code and sharing their frameworks and their libraries and their experience with you. And so it makes you that much better of a developer because you're able to tap into that network. So here's some of my favorite things. I was like, oh, I'll just do a subset of things. And then I started putting this together and I was like, okay, I just got to stop because there's just too much stuff here. So I'm not going to get a chance to go through all this, but I'll go talk a little bit about this now. When I talk about microservices specifically with RAD Server and REST Client Library, in my opinion, microservices is a really important trend to take advantage of. And thankful we have RAD Server and the REST Client Library to make that really, really easy to tackle. We also have great Internet of Things, Bluetooth beacons, Bluetooth LE, and app tethering support. There's Internet of Things components are built into the GetIt Package Manager. You can just go in there and you're like, hey, I want to talk to a scale, or I want to talk to a heart rate monitor, or whatever. And you just grab one of these libraries, it installs right into the IDE, and you have a component for talking to a heart rate monitor, talking to a Nest thermostat, whatever it is. There's a huge library of these in the GetIt Package Manager. They connect most of them via Bluetooth LE or Bluetooth Smart, which is the latest part of the Bluetooth 4.0 spec that is great for talking to these devices. It's low energy, low LE, is great for these small devices that you're sending small amounts of data over to it. We also have support for Bluetooth Classic, which is what you use for when you're like, when you're connected to your car or to your smartphone and you're sending music back and forth. It's that high bandwidth, longer range, but it uses more power. So LE uses less power. So you use Bluetooth Classic is more of a serial connection where you're just sending data back and forth. Beacons are these great proximity devices, which we have support for beacons both in RAD Server as part of the beacon fence technology and also some beacon components in the IDE as well. So what the idea of beacons is they're based on Bluetooth LE, but you can tell your range from a beacon is how it works. And so you know if you're, it can tell you exactly minute ranges or like close, medium, far type situation. And what you can do is you can have these beacons in fixed locations and you can triangulate your location. So it's great for indoor location and proximity. And then app tethering is a fantastic technology. It was originally designed with the ideas that you have existing Windows desktop applications and you want, instead of porting the whole application to mobile, instead use app tethering to connect your desktop application to your mobile application and send just parts of bits of data and some functionality back and forth. Brand new feature just released very recently is the new dark IDE theme, as well as a whole bunch of IDE enhancements. I'll show you a little bit about that. Love those things. More platforms. I talked about this already. I love all the platform support: iOS, macOS, Android, Linux, and Windows. With the Android, Linux, and Windows, I love going and finding new bits of hardware, new maker boards, devices, etc., and trying to run Delphi applications on it, whether it be smartwatches or Google Glass or some maker board or whatever the case is. If it's got an Intel processor on it, then you're going to run either Linux or Windows. If it's got Android or ARM processor on it, you're going to run Android. And actually, some of them, like Chromebooks, for example, that have Intel processors in them, they now many of them now support the Google Play Store and Android, so you can run Android apps on Chromebooks now built with Delphi. It's amazing. It's so much fun. So great. The QuickEdits, we just recently expanded those. IDE Insight, if you're not using IDE Insight, go Google it, read how to use it. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but this is a game changer. This will change how you interact with the IDE. It will make you so much more productive. You can get to everything now from the keyboard. You don't have to use the mouse. And it's just a fantastic way to get around the IDE and get things done. FireUI is a fantastic ability to design your user interfaces exactly the way you want them. And FireUI Live Preview as well. On Android's one of my favorite platforms. I have an Android phone, and we have Android Services support, which is the ability to have something running in the background all the time. There's not an equivalent on iOS. Well, there is. You can have on iOS. You can have an application that is running in the background. The whole application is, but it's only doing certain things in the background. Android services are a little bit different. So there's some similarities, but really Android services are quite different. Android Intents, which is where you can send messages or objects actually between applications, and broadcast receivers, which are the ability to do more things. Actually, with broadcast receivers, you can set up and have your application wake up on, for example, when the application boots, when the device boots up, you can have your application pop up and fire up automatically, or anything. There's a number of different events that you can have your application respond to and do certain things. GetIt Package Manager, I mentioned that earlier, the amazing third-party components in there. There's like almost 250, I think, in GetIt Package Manager now. It's great. If you're not taking advantage of that, you're really missing out. Makes it easy for you to keep up to date on the latest components. We're getting more and more in there all the time, whether it be open source libraries or third-party component libraries or sample projects, etc. Behavior services, these are kind of part of FireUI as well, but it's the ability where you can have things that are platform-specific behaviors. For example, like with the TMultiView, you can have the TMultiViews set up to behave however it should based on the platform it's on or based on the orientation. So if you're on like an iPad, when you rotate the iPad, the multi-view changes its layout whether you're in landscape or portrait mode. So you can design this one UI once that looks good and behaves appropriately on all the platforms. I like to call it smart styles, if you will, even, but it's really a very powerful functionality that lets you design these applications that look and function great on all the platforms. And we have a ton of great layouts and the ability to anchor and align all those things, those different platforms, or all those different layouts is very flexible. FireDAC, I'm a huge fan of FireDAC. It's a great data access framework. That's one thing Delphi's always had in spades is the ability to access databases. FireDAC shipping with Delphi is a great option for that and giving you the ability to access tons of databases natively with a huge amount of functionality and features. And if you're not using FireDAC, there's a ton of third-party libraries out there that you can take advantage of as well. But unless you're using the latest and greatest from somebody out there, you really should be looking at FireDAC because FireDAC has a huge amount of performance improvements over so many of the other, especially older database access frameworks out there. So definitely take a look at FireDAC if you're accessing databases. It has support for local SQL, which is one of my favorite features. Oh my goodness, this is so amazing. As well as MongoDB and the enterprise connectors. Enterprise connectors give you the ability to connect to REST services as if they're databases. It's really just like drag, drop, set a couple components, and you're done. A couple properties. And of course, the property method event model, the PME, is great. And I mentioned automatic reference counting earlier. Rich RTTI, interfaces, parallel programming, generics, anonymous methods. And like I said, this is where I realized I could just go on forever. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about microservices. So microservices are a variation on service-oriented architecture, which is this idea that your application development is done as a service. So microservices, instead of having one monolithic service, which was traditional service-oriented architecture, instead you have many loosely coupled services. So what this does, it makes your application more modular. It lets you have, one team that's focusing on one set of services. You don't have to store all your data in one database with one DBA as the gatekeeper of what goes in and what goes out. Instead, you can have multiple databases. So this means you can scale vertically instead of scaling horizontally, or scale it. Anyway, you could have more hardware spread out instead of having to have bigger hardware. I always get those confused, the horizontally vertically thing. But anyway, you can have more hardware, more servers because you have smaller chunks, smaller services, and smaller databases running on different servers. So this makes it easier to test and maintain the system. It also makes it more robust. You can have one service fail, but the entire application keep running, right? So maybe, let's say you're doing some sort of online service, for example. Like I saw a video recently on Netflix, they use microservices. And you could have, for example, the billing system could go offline. And instead of the entire application crashing, instead, when the user interface service tries to talk to the billing service, it says, hey, it's offline. It just says, I'm sorry, I can't access that right now. So check back later. And it's able to keep, users able to keep having an experience online. They just know that certain things aren't accessible right then. But because of the scaling possibility, you could actually have two different billing systems. And so if one goes offline, you could then roll over to their billing system, and the user would never know that the primary billing system was offline, for example. Microservices use lightweight protocols like HTTP REST JSON. Now, REST is not a protocol, neither is JSON, but these are the things that make up microservices. So it's one of those. Some people get really picky about whether if you call REST or JSON a protocol. REST describes a implementation, and JSON is a data format, if you will. HTTP is protocol. Now, in my opinion, my humble opinion, which is down here at the bottom, like I said earlier, this is a really important direction that software development is moving. really we're moving to a more API REST service type system where applications are built by integrating into all these different APIs and different services. And that's kind of the future we're going into. It used to be, everything was a DLL or a library that was compiled into your application or shipped bundled with your application. Now your applications are connecting out and reaching out and grabbing all these APIs and services, and that's how you're building your application. Luckily, we have the REST client library. This is introduced in XE5. It makes it really easy to connect to and consume REST services. These are designed to connect to any arbitrary REST service. So you can just point it to the REST service and consume it. We have a REST debugger that makes it really easy to debug these REST services, figure out how to connect to them, how to set it up, and then also rapid prototype that. So you can, once you've figured that in the REST service, you can just go into your application and use it and get going. It includes support for authentication, whether it be basic authentication, OAuth 1 or OAuth 2. And native HTTP, it uses native HTTP sockets, so it has the encryption HTTPS or TLS built into the platform you're on. There's no additional libraries to deploy. We also have a backend as a service library, which you can use that are kind of similar, built on some of the same technologies. It's ideal for working with backend as a service systems, whereas the REST components or libraries are just built for connecting to any arbitrary REST endpoint. One thing that's really cool about it is it can convert the REST or the JSON results into a data set. So if you're connecting to someplace that's giving you back a list of data with the same value, same properties, if you will, it says, oh, well, that's like a table, and it puts it into a table. And you can access it as like a table with an FD mem table. So that's a really great way to work with these systems. You can just cycle through it like because it's a table at that point. It's a data set, so you can go next, access the columns, the fields by name, and so on and so forth. The same model you're used to from your data set development. And then, of course, the flip side of this is RAD Server. So RAD Server is based on our Enterprise Mobility Server, EMS, and it makes it easy to build REST server or REST endpoints. It's ideal for building microservices. It's a turnkey solution that uses Interbase internally, but it can actually use any database or no other database behind the scenes. Interbase is used for user management and session management and stuff like that. It's similar to DataSnap. DataSnap is a set of libraries you can use to build something like RAD Server, but RAD Server is turnkey, ready to go. It includes the ability to make these REST endpoints, as well as beacon fence, IoT edge modules, thing points, push notifications to mobile devices, user management, and API analytics. So it's a big, robust system ready to go for building these REST servers. Let's talk about platforms. I've mentioned this a little bit already, but I thought it'd be useful to kind of spell this out. Chances are you know all this, but it's so exciting, and hopefully there'll be a little bits in here you aren't familiar with. Apple's Mac OS, which was formerly Mac OS X, it's now Mac OS. They changed the way they call it. They like to do that to standardize things. But we now support the latest High Sierra 10.132 release, the latest one from Apple. We have the FireMonkey library, which includes you can use that for your multi-platform development. So you can write with FireMonkey, develop your UI, your application once, and run it across all the supported devices. We also have, FireMonkey also includes some native components where that makes sense on Mac OS, or you can use CrossVCL, which is a third-party solution, to build VCL applications that will run on Mac OS using the native Mac all native Mac controls. And I think there's TMS has one as well that does that, now that I think about it. I can't remember what it's called. TMS does it. I think there might be a couple other ones out there. But anyway, the point is that you have a lot of options. You can use FireMonkey for that full cross-platform experience. FireMonkey is a great, robust, very flexible UI layer, or you can use VCL, which is tried and true system with CrossVCL. and build for Mac OS. Then we have Apple's iOS, which was formerly iPhone OS before they released the iPad. After they released the iPad, they said, hey, we'll just call it iOS so that it makes sense that you're not running iPhone OS on an iPad. We have support for the latest iOS 11, both 32-bit and 64-bit. Apple requires 64-bit in the latest ones. Actually, I think they require just 64-bit now. For a while, they were saying you could include both. I'm not positive. I know that for a while now, all the devices they've been shipping have been 64-bit. So again, we have FireMonkey for full cross-platform development, but it also includes those native controls for editors and such where it makes sense. Now, in that case, you don't need to know that. You just put it down and you set a property for the platform control versus the styled control, for example. And it just does that. So when the application runs, it uses the Cocoa Touch controls instead of the FMX owner drawn controls. Supports all the devices. It's compiling down to native ARM code, whereas Mac OS is compiling down to the Intel code for the platform it's on, and it uses ARC, automatic reference counting, automatically on the mobile devices. You can use, like I said before, you can use the RTL, which has all that great functionality, FireMonkey, etc., or you can reach down as much as you want to the Cocoa Touch APIs. So I've seen examples people have done, like the Touch ID, for example, to unlock the device. What else was it? I've seen a number of different things. Basically, any of the APIs on there you can access and use just as easily as if you're developing with Objective-C or Swift. But you don't have to use those APIs if you don't want to. And again, TMS has their ICL components for pure platform UI. Windows 10. Since Windows 95, Delphi has been the best tool for developing Windows applications. And anymore, it's like the only one out there. Everybody else has moved on to web development. No one's focusing on Windows development anymore. So Delphi is the best tool. It's the only tool out there if you're serious about doing Windows development anymore. We support all shipping versions of Windows, including, we don't officially support XP, but I know people that are developing on XP and for XP, and it works great. You can use VCL or FireMonkey for maximum flexibility. Choose whichever one you want to, what makes sense for you. We have both 32-bit and 64-bit compilers. And I mentioned this before, we have support for building Microsoft Store apps. The AppX bundler is built right into the IDE. And you can use either Win32 APIs or WinRT APIs. WinRT is the new API. Oh gosh, was it introduced in Windows 7 or Windows 8? I can't remember for sure. But anyway, on Windows 10, some of the APIs for the platform are exposed through Win32 APIs and some are exposed through WinRT APIs. You can use both. We have wrappers around most of them, and most of them are also available right in the through the RTL, so you don't have to worry about them. We have components and such. We have some Windows 10 specific components and controls and styles and such, as well as cross-platform controls or controls that work across all versions of Windows, for example. Now, I mentioned this before, you can also use this to target mini maker boards. I have a Latte Panda, which is a x86 board that runs Windows 10. It's a little bit bigger than a Raspberry Pi, maybe about twice the size of a Raspberry Pi, but it's a very powerful device. Actually, it's running right here next to me, and I have that hooked up to another computer, and it's just providing like some news feeds and stuff like that for me. Android, like I said, maybe my favorite platform. We have support for the latest Android Oreo 8.1. There was actually Google rolled out Oreo 8, and they broke the ability to debug applications. But 8.1, they fixed it, so that's good. They blocked the port you needed to debug applications, which was kind of funny. 8.1, they fixed it though, which is great. One thing is that in the last release, the 10.2.2 release, we had a lot of Android performance improvements so that it's a lot faster on Android. It's part of a big refactoring doing to add support for platform controls on Android. So you can use the FMX cross-platform UI on here. So again, you can develop your UI and application once, have it look great across all the platforms. And you can use the RTL or access the API directly. We have a JNI Dalvik bridge that you can use to reach down and grab those APIs. We actually have some tools you can use. You can take any jar file, any Android jar file pretty much, and run it through this tool. It'll create a Delphi wrapper for it, and then you can then access that in your application, bundle up in your app bundle, and you're good to go. It's really easy to do. We have native ARM compiler, but some Android devices actually. So Intel was pushing the Android Atom processors, or the Atom processors on Android devices for a while, and then they're like, okay, we changed our mind. We're not going to push that anymore. Now they're focusing on notebooks and netbooks with the Atom processors, and like Chromebooks. Now then Google said, hey, we're going to add Android support on Chrome. So some Chromebooks you buy now have Android support. They said that all Chromebooks sold this year, 2017, will at some point get, or a new Chromebooks introduced this year will at some point get Android support, Google Play Store support. And then going in 2018, there's going to be really hardcore focused on that. I've got a few different ones and tested it out, and Delphi applications work great on Android, on ARM processors or Intel processors. On the Intel processors, they have a libhoudini library that Intel developed that does a translation from ARM to Intel instructions. A little bit of slowdown, but still very fast for most intents and purposes. There's a few small little things, but it's totally things you can work around in your development process. And Linux is the most recent platform we've released. Officially, we support Red Hat and Ubuntu, but the reality is it works across most other Linux distributions. If you look at the Linux families of distributions, Ubuntu is the most popular one on the Debian side, and then Red Hat kind of is the Red Hat side. There's a lot of variations on Red Hat, whether it be Fedora or a number of other ones. And basically, if all the other Linux distributions fall into those families, either Red Hat or Debian. And I've talked to people that have used other ones, Slack, for example, Slackware, and they're able to get it to work. There's a couple libraries that are in different places. You can move them around and fix things. So it's not always, straight, we'll say, out of the box experience. But if you want to make it work and you know what you're doing, you can certainly make it work on most of the other Linux distributions. We ship with server-side and command line development for Linux. That's kind of the purpose we're focusing on. That includes all of FireDAC, RTL, DataSnap, RAD Server. The whole server stack is there. We have the ability to build Apache modules, etc. But the FMX Linux, which is third-party by KSDev, they have the ability to build GUI applications with FireMonkey. You just run their components. It actually creates a variation of FireMonkey for Linux when you do the installation, and you just build it like you would normally, and then your application can work across all the platforms in FireMonkey. It's 64-bit for performance, and we have full access to the platform APIs, just like everywhere else. So we're going to talk real quick about app tethering. This is a really cool technology. Like I said, it was originally designed with the idea that you have an existing Windows application, you want to extend it onto the mobile device. It connects over Wi-Fi, TCP/IP, or Bluetooth. Typically, I find that Wi-Fi, TCP/IP is the best one to use, and it can send, whether it be lots of images back and forth. I've done things where it's like screen cloning, right? You can take pictures with the mobile device and send it to the desktop, for example, or it can have commands, right? So you tap a button on the mobile device and it evokes an action on the desktop. So there's lots of flexibility and functionality there. It's bi-directional and it's peer-to-peer. So there really isn't you can connect either direction. So the mobile device can connect to the desktop, or the desktop can connect to the mobile device. And it doesn't have to be that scenario either. I've used this to connect mobile device to mobile device frequently, as well as desktop to desktop. So you can really connect with this however you want to. It's just this very robust, powerful framework for making these peer-to-peer connections between your applications. It does automatic discovery as well, which is really useful to have. So this is one of the newer features here, is the new theme. You can choose the light side or the dark side. When you install 10.2.2, it's going to come up and say, or any version after that, it's going to come and say, hey, what's your favorite theme? From the first time you run it, and you can choose if you want to be light theme or dark theme. You can quickly change it from the UI. I love the new dark theme. It's great, looks great. The light theme actually has been updated as well, so they both look really good. But the dark theme is great if you're spending lots of hours looking at your IDE or working late into the night. So definitely check that out. It's a great new feature. It looks beautiful. The text editors have been updated as well. So if you have a dark theme, you can have a dark text editor. And you can also customize these as well. They're very customizable. You can load any VCL theme in you want. And that's what it looks like there. That's the new dark IDE theme experience for you. And there's a button up there at the top in the middle. Let's see if I can, right there, there's a little moon looking thing there that you can use to quickly change between different themes. So GetIt Package Manager. Let's see, there's 270. I just grabbed this one here. 270 packages in the GetIt Package Manager right now. This includes components, Internet of Things devices, 129 trials that you can get, connectors to different databases, whether it be these are the enterprise connectors you can use to connect to like CouchDB, Salesforce, Facebook, Twitter, etc. There's lots of great stuff in there. Styles, IDE plugins, so much stuff in here. It makes it so easy for you to install and update these components. So when an update comes out, you can just grab that. Also, if you're sharing the library, when somebody else gets it, it can say, hey, I need to install this package from GetIt and install it for them automatically. So this is a really powerful way. Go out here and check this out. Find there might be some things in here you need to use, or maybe you can find out, oh my goodness, I've been using Jedi, but now I can just install it from the GetIt Package Manager. QuickEdits. These were just expanded recently. We introduced these a few versions ago for VCL, and this is just some quick access to common designers right in the design surface. So for example, alignment, layouts, etc. We've just recently expanded that to also be available in FireMonkey. So this makes you really, really productive. When you drop those components down, you don't have to go over to the property editor property inspector to find the properties you want. You can just change them right there from QuickEdits. FireUI and Live Preview. So FireUI makes designing multi-device applications really easy. You just, first of all, it gives you the ability to preview it on different devices right there in the IDE. And then you can use the layouts to do the anchoring and such right there to have a really good, very flexible layout. But then you can also use variant views to tweak the layout for each platform. So what that means is you can say, okay, on Android, I want to do something a little differently. I want to move this component around. I want to change this. I want to add a control, for example, that's not visible on the platforms. You can do all of that behavior really easily right there. And it's variant views, so it's still based on this master view. And then the really neat thing is you can get a live preview on real devices. So you can see what you're working on the different devices while you're working on it. It's really very powerful. In multi-device application development, it's really important to make sure your user interface looks great on all platforms. Luckily, FireUI makes this really easy. On controls like the tab control, you can set the tab position to platform default, which causes the tabs to automatically change position on each platform according to the design guidelines for that platform. You can also preview it on different platforms right here from the IDE and create variant views for specific devices. This gives you the ability to create a view that takes full advantage of larger displays on tablets or desktops, while also looking good on devices like watches, Google Glass, and phones. And then to preview it in multiple places at the same time, you can come over here to the multi-device preview and add any platforms you want to preview it on. And then you'll know what your user interface is going to look like across all platforms. Now, all this is great, but nothing beats actually seeing your user interface on the target device, which you can do now thanks to the FireUI Live Preview feature. Live Preview gives you the ability to preview your user interface on actual physical devices. There's lots of information about it in the doc wiki, but I'll let you know that we do ship with the source so that you recompile it and make changes, adding additional packages for other components, and deploy it to any devices you want to, or you can deploy it via binary as well. Before I show you this, though, I'm going to load a style here on my style book. Let's go for the Windows 10 Modern Blue style. So now we've loaded a style here just for Windows 10. So you'll see a variety of devices here. All of these are connected to my IDE. This is my iPad mini. Notice there's no wires on these devices. They're connected wirelessly over Wi-Fi using the app tethering technology because they're all on the same network. So iPad mini running iOS, Android phone running Android, Dell tablet running Windows 10, my IDE is running on Windows 10 here, and then over here is my MacBook Pro running OS 10. Now all of them are running the live preview application. So now I can connect any of these to the IDE and get the live preview. So let's go ahead and start with the iPad here. Hit connect. So it's got the preview up on the iPad here. Now you'll notice right away that the screen is not blue, it's white, and that's because the blue theme I have loaded is the Windows 10 Modern Blue theme. So it only shows up on Windows 10, doesn't show up on the iPad. Also, the tabs have moved from the top to the bottom because on Windows, tabs go on the top, on iOS, tabs go on the bottom. If I make a change, like let's add a button on here. You don't see the border on iOS, but the button is there. You'll see it says button 1. If I change tabs, it also changes tab on the iPad. And also the iPad is live, so I can tap on the iPad and edit this. And that's because the user interface is running, but it is not actually running the code behind. So if there was something that happened on the text box change, that wouldn't happen. So now let's connect the Android device here. So we'll just tap on Studio and hit connect. And we'll see it connects. And again, as I make changes, like for example, changing tabs, it changes tabs. And you'll notice on Android, again, the tabs are on the top, whereas iOS, the tabs are on the bottom. So let's go ahead and add Windows 10. We'll just tap on the item we want and hit connect. And we'll see there's the window appeared on Windows 10. Now this time you'll notice it is blue. That's because it's got the Windows 10 theme applied to it. So we see it in with the Windows 10 theme, the blue theme. And now let's go ahead and do the OS 10. And on here, we'll just tap the one we want and hit connect. And it connects and brings it up. And it's not blue. And that's because, like I said, the theme is only for Windows 10, so it'll show up on Windows 10. You could manage live preview in the IDE here. If you just go to the FireUI live preview page in preferences. In here, this allows you to turn it on and off. Allows you to change your server name, which is the name of your IDE, how it'll show up on the devices. And then you can also set a password if you want to prevent other devices from connecting to your IDE if you work in an environment with other developers. Also, you get a list of all the connected devices, the device name, and the OS that they're running. And from here, you can select one and disconnect it if you want to. So there we go. We're previewing across 4 devices, Windows 10, iOS, Android, and OS 10, with the new live preview feature of FireUI. FireDAC. I mentioned this earlier. I love FireDAC. It's a great native database access framework. Works across all the platforms, lots of amazing features and great performance. It doesn't require any extra deployment with your application. You just need the database drivers, and your application, and you're good to go. Unlike the BDE, years ago, you had to deploy the BDE separately. It supports many databases. It's like all of them. Seriously though, it's like all the SQL databases, SQL Server, Oracle, SQLite, MySQL, Postgres, MariaDB. I can't remember all of them, and ODBC. So if it's not supported through one of those, it's probably supported through ODBC. Also added support for NoSQL databases with MongoDB, which is one of the more popular NoSQL databases. And yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. And then one of my favorite features is the local SQL, FD local SQL. With local SQL, you can run SQL queries on any T dataset descendant, whether you got that dataset from FireDAC or from another data source. This, I can't tell you how many times in the past I've wished I could do this, because SQL is great for doing working on these sets of data, right? And oftentimes in the past, I've had data that I've pulled out of a database or that I've generated memory, and it's like, oh, if I could just do a SQL query on this, it would be so much easier, but instead I'm writing all this code to cycle through the data and such. That's what local SQL lets you do. But then the really cool thing is actually you do a join across heterogeneous data sources. So you could have data sets you've gotten from different places, from different databases that you generated locally in memory or whatever. And you can do a join across all of these. And wow, that is so flippin' amazing. I just can't tell you how cool it is, how much in the past I wish I could do something like that. So let's look at the architecture, how you put all these components together. You're going to start out with one or more T dataset descendants. These are the things that are holding your source data that you want to query against. So get this from whatever data source that you're going to get it from. And then you're going to put down an FD connection, and you're going to specify the SQLite driver. SQLite provides the engine inside for local SQL. And with anytime you're using FireDAC, you need to put down the T wait cursor, or the FD GUI X wait cursor. So go ahead and add that component as well. Then you're going to put down an FD local SQL component and connect it to that connection. Once you've done that, on the FD local SQL component, there is a property that's a collection of data sets. So you're going to use that property to specify all the data sets you want to include in your local SQL engine. Okay, simple enough. Then you're going to put down a FD query or FD command, and you're going to put all your SQL in there that you want to execute against those data sets. And then you just have to activate everything. So you want to activate your data sets that are your source your data first, then activate your local SQL second, and then activate your query component last so that it's able to pull the data. So when you activate TFD local SQL, that's when it sets up the local SQL engine. So it has to have those data sets active so it's able to interrogate those. And then you activate the query, it connects to the local SQL engine in order to pull the data out for you. Let's take a look at FD local SQL in action. Now I wanted to create a sample, a demo here that showed the flexibility and power of local SQL, but also hopefully is easy to follow and understand. So hopefully that's what I've accomplished here. Hopefully at least it's really cool. So here what we have is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entirely different data sets. Okay, we have ADO dataset, FD memtable, IBX, T-client dataset, and a DB Express dataset. All right, and so each of these are pulling a different set of data down, and we're going to query across all these using local SQL. So let's walk through this here. I have a DB Express customers table, a REST components here that are going out and querying a REST service and populating a client data set. Now, normally I would populate an FD mem table, but I wanted to use a T-client data set just to mix things up and show flexibility. Here we're using IBX to get our sales table. Here I'm using an FD mem table and I'm populating it via code. So right here I'm adding in some records into it. So this is a simple table that's just going to provide a union between two different tables. I've also saved it off to a file so that I can load it at design time, so that makes it easier to demo, but it also can be populated via code. And then lastly, I have ADO connecting to a access database, and it's getting our regions table. Okay, so whatever data source you're using, any T dataset descendant, these are all the ones we happen to ship, but it could be a third-party T dataset descendant, doesn't matter. However you're going to connect to a database, however you're going to populate a data set, do that. Then you're going to put down your FD connection and specify the driver name of SQLite. Remember, also put down your wait cursor. It's going to be specific to whichever platform you're on. And then you're going to put down your local SQL component. So local SQL component is specified the FD connection that we put down that's pointing to SQLite. And then we come into our datasets property. And in this collection here, we specify all of the datasets we want. So I have the CDS REST, and then I've given it a friendly name of REST. So the cool thing about the friendly name is in my SQL I'm going to write, I just reference it by that friendly name here. So the customers table becomes customers. Okay, very cool there. This provides us a nice little layer of indirection to those components, so we're not stuck to whatever the table name or component name is for the source. Once you've done that, then you put down your FD query or FD command. In this case, I'm using a query. Point it to the same connection here, so FD connection, and write your SQL. Now what I have here is a join. It's going to go through and join users tables, even with an outer join down here. Ooh, exciting stuff. Before I run that, I'm going to do a little spelunking. So we'll come up here, and I'll just put a little comment on this. And so let's go ahead and do select star from customers. So this is going to do a local query against this data set. There we go there. There's our customers table. This is really cool. Watch this. I can do a SQL query against a REST data source. Oh my goodness, that is so cool. I'll go ahead and resize this here so you can see some of those columns. With REST JSON, there's nothing that specifies the column width, and so all the columns are huge, but that's okay. You can see the data's there. Okay, so now let's do a query against IBX. That's the sales table. Execute, and you can see that. And now we're going to do a query against the in-memory data set, the FDMM table. Now the cool thing here is this data set was populated from code. So anytime you have some data that is in columns and rows and you think, oh, wouldn't it be great if I could run a SQL query against this data? Guess what? Now you can. Watch this. I think it's called REST sales reps. That's got a long one because it's a one-to-one relationship here. So it's the ID, the REST ID, which comes from here, and the sales rep from here. So it's just joining those two values together so that I can do a join for it. Okay, so I'm not going to do the ADO, behaves the same way, but this is really cool, really exciting that I can run a SQL statement against a REST data source. I can run a SQL query statement against an in-memory data set that was populated in code. And now, for the coolest part ever, is I can actually do a join across all these different data sources. Watch this. Boom! Look at that. I just did a query across a REST data source, across an in-memory data set, across access table, interbase, IB Express, whatever. It doesn't matter. I can do queries against it. Just one column from each table here just to show that I'm connected to them. But very cool stuff. So you can see here, this is region descriptions.outer join. So we scroll down to the bottom, we see some of those records are missing. That's okay. Outer join works. Cool stuff. Very cool. Very exciting. This is, hopefully, you're excited about this. You're as excited about this as I am, because this is really cool stuff. Very amazing to be able to do this and to do it so simply. All you have to do is include the connection, the local SQL component, and then your query, and you're off to the races. And I can't believe I'm running out of time already. So much to talk about in so little time. There's so much I love about working with Delphi and about working in the Delphi community and working at Embarcadero. It's fantastic. It's great. I hope you are just as excited as I am. You can always check out the What's New sections in RAD Studios doc wiki. It's at docwiki.embarcadero.com/radstudio/Ian for English or whatever language works for you, and then main_page. That will take you to the most recent version of doc wiki, where you can then find the What's New sections for each release. Also check out the sample sites where you can look through the source of all the samples that we have and start looking at those. And then follow us on Twitter. We do quite a bit to post on Twitter about what latest stuff we have going on and some of the cool stuff we find online. So definitely check those out. FireMonkey Team, Rad Tools, and Embarcadero Tech. And also our community site, community.embarcadero.com. We're continually posting, updating, and providing new content there as well. So join us on there, and we look forward to seeing you online.